Hi, everybody. I was recently invited by San Jose Episcopal Day School to give this talk as part of their Parenting Perks program. There in person, which we just wrapped up this morning. It was excellent. It was so great. The audience had some amazing questions, and a really great conversation took place afterwards. So my ask or my hope would be for this on-demand version here would be that should you have any questions or things you'd like to discuss with other parents, that you do just that. You can certainly reach out to those in your circle of friends. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to lots of folks to kind of keep the conversation going, because that's where a lot of us kind of come up with our best ideas, is when we hear those that are shared by other parents or other people who we know and trust. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this on-demand kind of virtual version of this. I hope you find it enjoyable and useful, and I hope you share some of the things that you're doing with me, because again, there are probably some things that I haven't even thought of, just like some of the ideas that were shared this morning. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. As you can see here, the title of the talk, this is all around protecting our kids online. And the kind of disclaimer that I gave at the beginning of the talk this morning was that we all know to protect our kids online from, strangers and people we don't really want them talking with, people we don't know or trust or want to have access to our children when they're online. I don't think anyone has to be sold on that. But what I think is also important to remember is protecting our kids online. I don't know if I want to say from the tech companies who are putting out their favorite devices, apps, and games, but in some ways, maybe I do, because they're collecting a lot of information from our kids, a lot of information that we have the ability to make decisions as parents of, do we want this information shared? Do we want them to, our kids to even be able to share this information with them? So I made the talk a little bit more about that, but at the same time, it can be applied to protecting our kids from anyone that we don't, anyone or any one company that we don't want to have access to them. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Noel Wurst, if I haven't said that already. I've had two kids come through San Jose Episcopal all the way through sixth grade. They loved every second of it. So did we. And I currently have a student there as well. It's an amazing place. It's my favorite school in the entire world. It really is. And as a board member, I am so honored to be one at the school. And I feel like I'll spend my life repaying or giving back to a school that has done so much for my kids. So it's an honor to give this talk, to do any sort of volunteer work for the school. And I know that many of the school's volunteers feel the same way. I've been in the tech industry for about 12 years. That doesn't make me the expert on this topic or any other topic in technology, but I do think I've been able to kind of have a behind the scenes look at all the good that tech can do and has done, and all the bad that tech can do and has done, and even the motivations for doing more of either one. And I'll share a little bit more about that today. I'm also an Atlanta native. I always feel compelled to point that out for some reason, and am an avid Braves and Bulldog fan. So with that, the agenda that I gave this morning is going to start off with a quick blessing, to the parents who are embarking on this journey, because it is not easy. It is daunting. It is sometimes impossible. It is scary, and it's also really worth it because it's our kids. The one big thing that I think is needed to have any chance of sanely managing our kids' presence online and being aware of where they are and who they're talking to and what they're doing and what the results are of all those things and more is trust. So we'll talk about the importance of trust. Going to share a little bit of an insider truth about tech. You may or may already have known or assumed the thing I'll share about tech, but I just want to make sure I share it for those who don't. Going to give three quick tips. I hope my goal is that these three tips are like approach agnostic. So whether you are just staunchly keeping your kids off of the internet, or whether they are there in every capacity or something in between. These are three tips that I hope, again, don't really conflict with whatever your approach is that you're taking with your kids. We'll talk about how it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book when it comes to deciding where we kind of send our kids or send ourselves, into the kind of tech and online world. It says we're going to do an affirmation at step six. I think I have them sprinkled throughout the talk because they're needed sometimes. It can feel really overwhelming and daunting and scary, and I think kind of being reminded that we can do this is important. Give a quick recap, and then as you can see here, we had this open dialogue in person. Just because you're watching this as a video doesn't mean you can't still have an open dialogue with me, with other parents, with other people in your circle of friends and things like that. And again, I hope you do. So, why a blessing? Why starting it off with bless your heart? Because protecting our kids online, protecting our kids anywhere is difficult. It's challenging. It's required. I mean, I would say it's our responsibility as parents to do that. But when you really take a look at what you are up against, when we think about our kids being online, whether it's through social media or online gaming or just being logged into some app, on their phone or their other devices, it's a lot to take on. Again, it's required that we do it, but bless you for doing it. Bless you for caring and for being willing to, maybe in sometimes it's stand up to these companies. Maybe it's to stand up for your kids. Maybe it's to help them, kind of take on some of these challenges as well, where they can kind of chip in. So when I say take on these companies, I mean it's anywhere that your kids are hanging out online. All of these companies like Twitch, if they're into watching, online streaming of really anything, if they have a PlayStation, if they're into Minecraft or Fortnite or Snapchat or Instagram or Apple or Xbox or Mario and Nintendo or Discord or YouTube or Android devices or Roblox or TikTok, it's all of these apps and more. And it's not uncommon for kids of, whatever ages. There's no kind of right or wrong. You should not be on this app at this age. You should be on this app. There's no hard and fast rule about that. And I'll kind of point that out a lot today as well. But it's not uncommon for your kid to be on any number of these devices or games or apps. It's really not. I mean, it looks like a lot, but then you start to think about it, and it's like if you've got a phone, or if your kid has a phone, or and they also have a gaming device, or maybe they even have a one they use at home and one they use on the go, like a Nintendo Switch. And then you think about the number of apps that can be on those devices. Your kids can be in lots of places online really, really quickly. And so what becomes a little bit daunting is that you have parental controls that you can set up on each of the devices that are on this picture here and lots of others that you may have. And then there's parental controls inside of each of the apps as well. And so when you start to think of just the sheer magnitude of managing the online profiles, logins, passwords, saved information, location information, saved credit cards that might be on two, three, four, five devices, and then 10, 12 apps split between those, it's a lot to manage and keep up with. And so, bless your heart for taking that on and for enabling your kids to be the places that they want to be and the places you feel okay with them being. And I'm going to reiterate this a lot today too. Where you allow your kids to be online and for how long and who they're talking with and how they are talking with them, is it via voice chat or text or video, whatever it is, that is entirely your call. None of this talk is any sort of they better not be here, you're crazy for letting them be here at all. I fully believe that it's important to state that that is your call. And it doesn't matter if every other kid in their circle of friends is all over here online and live streaming this and that. If you're not cool with it, if it gives you the creeps, you get to say your kid's not going to be there. I'm going to talk about the importance of communication with them and making those decisions, the communication with your friends who maybe are allowing their kids to be somewhere you haven't really thought of yet to really fully understand things in a little bit. But I want to reiterate, and again and again and again, that it is your call on how much or how little you allow your kids to be online. No matter what choice you've made, you can be very aware of the types of things that your child is either able to expose to the world or that is able to be exposed to them. And I think that's really important. So the decision is not so much what's okay for me to, or what's okay for my kid to, or what is okay for my kid to kind of participate in or take part in or download or stream or watch or play. I think that's much more important for you to simply be aware of, okay, they're here. This is everything I have control of, keeping them from or keeping other people from getting. These are the things I don't. I need to make some informed decisions around those things. Time for an affirmation. That was a lot. I could tell some of the parents in the room this morning were already a bit like kind of shell shocked just from the initial thing. That's why I put this in here. You got this. Okay. You've got this. Lots of us, meaning people with kids who are online in some places, not all places. Some kids are online in all places. Lots of people are doing this well to the best of their ability, hanging in there. Of course, it's still stressful. Of course, it's still a lot of work. Of course, it's still worrisome as parents, but you've got this. I promise you do. Okay, I do. Now, for anyone who's wondering, well, yeah, but why is that asterisk there? You got to go heavy on trust. And I mean the trust that you put into your kids and the trust that they put into you and the time you give it for that trust to grow. It doesn't mean on day one you got to hand them full trust and it's theirs to hopefully maintain. No, you probably should kind of work up to it. Everyone's already at a different level of trust of you and of as a parent and a kid, and that level of trust that kid has, that that parent has their best intentions, knows what they're talking about, and things like that. Wherever you're at, we just want you going up, and we've got all kinds of great ways for you to do just that. So, speaking of those ways, in the talk this morning, I asked the room to kind of shout out some of the ways that trust grows. And I gave them just the number of like ways, meaning like one word examples. So things like honesty helps trust grow. And so I asked the room to kind of shout out their one word answers. And I knew this would happen. They had a ton that I hadn't really thought of. And so I came up with eight. Oops, got ahead of myself there. I came up with eight. Some of these were shouted out by folks in the room. Lots of others were things I hadn't even thought of that I was like, oh, that's huge. That's so important. I can't believe I didn't even think about that. So this is not the eight. This is not the eight for you to, put up on the wall and work towards and not think about any other things. You may have other things that you personally or you and your family, you and your kids really prioritize and really helps build trust. That's great. Use those. Like lean into those things, whatever they are, that helps trust grow because you're going to need to have that. And if you noticed, I didn't say the trust between you and the tech companies, meaning you and Microsoft or you and Nintendo or you and YouTube, whatever the case may be. It doesn't mean that those companies or entities are entirely untrustworthy, but it's not a bad idea to keep them at arm's length. They're only as trustworthy as you know them, and how much do you actually know them? I don't think that I know them very well at all. I don't work there. I don't know their inner workings and why they've made the decisions that they've made, why they've gotten in trouble for the things they've gotten in trouble for, things like that. So the trust between you and your kids, I believe, is far more important than the trust between you and some, faceless tech company. And I don't think that's a stretch for anyone to really try and wrap their head around. So the thing you saw here just a minute ago when all these were circled was my hope was that I could grab one or two or three of these and say, I know eight's a lot to take on right now, but let's just focus on three. I think you need all eight of these. And then the ones that you kind of think of in your mind as well. Again, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot to kind of wrap your head around and focus on, but it's our kids. What other choice do we have? We do so much to protect them in so many different environments. The online world is just another one, and it's really important that we protect them there as well as much as we can. Now, when I say about like not trusting tech companies or keeping them at arm's length, the reason that I say that is because what a tech company essentially is really hungry for data, meaning any kind of data they can get from you and any kind of data and science and understanding that they can get of anyone using their tools or their games or their apps or their devices. Today, we're just talking about tech. And so, again, knowing that we're not focusing on the trust of them, we don't really need to do that. We're focusing on the trust between us and our kids, and growing that takes time. It really does. It takes time. So don't worry if you are untrusting of your kid having this device completely unsupervised in their room at this age, whatever age that is. That's okay. When I say I want you to focus on building the trust to be okay with them having that device, I don't mean so that you can not be aware of what's going on between them and that device. I want you to be very aware of that. And I want that to be what helps build trust. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's talk about the truth about tech. Why am I talking so much about like, let's not really focus on the trust of them? The tech industry to your kids, when they think about the tech industry, is really this, and a lot of other, craftily created, adorable or cool, scary, kind of creatures from the games and apps that they love. When they think about tech, they just think about their favorite games and their favorite apps and their favorite cartoon characters or characters to play as or favorite Snapchat filters. That's by design, by those companies. This is what those companies want your kids to think of when they think of these companies. I don't necessarily mean for any sort of nefarious purpose. I just mean like this is what they want to be seen as. Well, what do we see tech companies as? I thought it was really interesting when I was building this talk out. I wanted to go to each of the like parental controls pages for Apple and Microsoft and those kind of companies to see who are they telling us they are? Like, who are they showing us they are when it comes to how much they care about parental controls and keeping our kids safe online? What do they want to be seen as, not to our kids, but to us? And if you go to Apple's parental controls page, meaning you just Google like Apple parental controls or Apple family safety, whatever it is, this is the image that it gives you on one of their pages. Now, you may at some point or some points in your life be sitting there with your kid and looking at something fun or funny on their phone. You probably will. They'll show you something cool they made or some funny video they found, or what you're showing them a funny video you found, whatever the case may be. What I think is interesting though is on the parental controls page, it's like they want to go ahead and show you that. They want to show you the result of like having this device in their hands and you trust that they have it. They don't show you what a nightmare it can be, depending on the manufacturer, I would say, to set up those parental controls. They don't show you how difficult and challenging that can be when they roll out updates to these things all the time. And sometimes those updates come with really cool new controls and capabilities regarding our ability to protect our children. And sometimes they squeeze in stuff. We have no idea why they did that, and we hate that they did. But this is the image that they show you of parental control on an Apple device. And this is parental controls of a Microsoft device. And I told everyone this morning, I think it's really funny that in this image, mom's over here doing that entirely on her own, and dad's over here like painting with the kids. Like it should be done, communally, I believe. I just thought this was an interesting image. This is what it looks like to set up parental controls on Nintendo Switch, apparently. And this is what it looks like to set up parental controls on Snapchat. This is not true. Like, this is not the truth about tech. And even working in the tech industry, I think I can say and pretty strongly defend that if the tech industry had it their way, if in a perfect world, they wouldn't even have to have parental controls. I think that they have them somewhat begrudgingly. I think they've been forced to have them, sometimes by parents voicing their concerns and voicing their demands, and sometimes by even as high up as Congress, voicing their demands. I think they wish they didn't have to have any, because all parental controls do to them, I believe, is prevent the amount of information about their users, whether it be kid or adult, that comes back to them, because they are absolutely gluttonous when it comes to the amount of information that they want about their users. Today we're talking about their kid users. They make no difference between, oh, it's a kid, we actually want less information from them. That is not true in the slightest. And you should know, or just kind of have it in your head, that every second that your child is logged into their Nintendo profile or their Minecraft account or their Fortnite account or Snapchat or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, every single action, conscious and unconscious, that they're making is being tracked, recorded, analyzed, and used to make decisions within their company. I'm talking about every eyeball movement when it comes to being on camera, every click that they are making and how long it takes them to make the next click. And did they click this button faster when it was rounded edges or sharp edges, and when it was on the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen? And which font, and how long did it take them to make the purchase after clicking the box? And this whole friend history, where are those friends from, and who are they, and how are they using our apps, and their whole chat history, and what did they say, and when did they use exclamation points? They are measuring all of it. It is all being shared with them. Sometimes that is completely fine. And you may look at how that data is being collected or used and go, I don't mind. That seems okay with me. And that's okay. Sometimes you may look at it and go, excuse me, and have a huge problem and want to shut that thing off immediately. And sometimes you can do that. And we'll talk about that too. This is some of the stuff that I was just talking about. And this isn't even scratching the surface of what they are collecting from your kids when they are online. They want to know every single thing they do. And a lot of times with parental controls, it can seem a lot easier to just not set them or to just barely set them. Again, that's okay. I would say, though, that that's okay if you've looked at what it is that is enabled for them to be able to do and use and share with, and go, yeah, I'm good with this. That's great. I just want you to make informed decisions as opposed to making no decision or just, nope, nothing's allowed. I'm not even looking at what they want. I would love for you to at least look at what it is your kids are wanting to use. What all of a sudden opens up when they use that thing. What can you turn off or control or quiet or keep down, and what can't you? So that you, as a parent, can make those decisions that are yours to make. But all of this stuff and more are things that those companies want and spend billions of dollars trying to come up with ways to collect from your kids and from you. The reason that they make all these upgrades is to get more people, more kids using their stuff, their apps, their games, their devices, whatever it is. There is something in it for them to set up parental controls. But I, again, would argue that they could make it a lot easier to set up those parental controls and to understand what you are allowing and what you are approving of and what you're not. Because you can really easily, like you'll see here, this second one, the PlayStation 5 system update, that's probably an update that you have to make on the device, or it won't let you play certain games because you have to play that up. You have to do that update first. It's just like with an Apple, like an iPhone, where it tells you there is some sort of big security breach that they realized in the last release. Here is an update. We strongly recommend you do this update ASAP, or in some cases, we're even going to do it for you if you don't do it by this date. Oh, and also that update comes with the ability to start or join Discord voice chat. I don't want that. That's not a thing I let my kids do, is use voice chat on these games. That's not a thing I would allow. So now, as a responsible, aware parent, with a child online, I have to go in and make sure that after doing this update, they're not allowed to now go use the voice chat that I had previously turned off. You'll see headlines like this first one here. Fortnite parental controls are getting a big upgrade. That sounds great, right? Upgrades. Upgrades are great. An upgrade can still come with stuff that you don't really want. Look at the YouTube one. YouTube's new parental controls. We're all for parental controls on YouTube, so they don't see the stuff on there that we don't want them to see. Well, apparently there was a new parental control that came out that will let kids read comments that were previously turned off. Why? Why is that? Why was that added? For what reason? I know I don't get to make those decisions, but why was it added, and where do I go in and turn those back off? Because I don't want my kid reading those comments. So you see all these headlines, and sometimes they can be really complimentary of the company, and you might think like, "Wow, what a great company! They're starting to really embrace parental controls." Oh, you should also know that the reason that sometimes those companies are starting to embrace parental controls is because they've gotten nailed for stuff like this. Every one of these companies has gotten in trouble, I would say not enough trouble, for using data that they were not supposed to be using it, for using it in ways that they said they weren't, for being inaccurate or misleading or vague about parental control data. It's a nightmare to me. It's a nightmare to me that, number one, these companies continue to get in trouble for this kind of stuff, and they all will continue to keep getting in trouble for this stuff, especially when the penalties are only the financial amounts that you see here. TikTok might make $2.4 million a minute for all I know. Microsoft makes billions upon billions of dollars. $20 million means nothing to them, and $520 million means nothing to Fortnite or Epic Games. And so they will continue to try to get away with collecting data that they don't need or shouldn't have access to, or making it very difficult for parents to even understand what their kids are now sharing that they previously weren't. They will continue to do that. So it's our job and our responsibility to make sure that we are very aware of what's going out from our kids online, whether it's to a tech company or to a total stranger with ill intent in their mind, and what we are able to rein in, keep to ourselves, not have them sharing freely. I also recommended this movie this morning, The Social Dilemma on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend watching it as a parent. It's horrifying. It just is. It is a both interviews with people in the tech industry, is also with this kind of like fictional story of seeing kind of like what happens when these companies act the way that they act. And it's largely around companies like Facebook and Instagram doing these tiny little tweaks in the background to get your kid or whoever you, let's talk about kids though, since that's today's talk, to not just get them to download the app. That's not the end goal anymore. I gave this metaphor, this example this morning of, when I was a kid and I wanted a new video game, the company, Nintendo, whoever it was, just needed my mom to buy me that game. And once that purchase was complete, that was done. They were done with her. They were done with me. They were moving on to someone else because I had the game. And that's all they could really track. This game sold at this store. They didn't even know who was buying it and for what age kid and things like that. Now, the purchase or the download is just the beginning. That's simply the entry point into, okay, now the real work begins within those companies. And so, what I mean by that is there's this guy who is interviewed in the movie. His name is Jaron Lanier. He is credited as being one of the co-creators of virtual reality. Like he's a really big deal when it comes to like knowing tech and knowing the tech industry. He's a little fiery and inflammatory, a little more so than I would prefer, but this quote really struck me. And this is what these companies are after. They're not just after purchases. They're not just after downloads. They're not just after likes. They are after changes in behavior, imperceptible, slight, gradual changes. That is what the goal is. Because when they can control that, when they can change the way that, we'll say child in this case, behaves, talks online, communicates online versus in person versus not in versus online versus on, or sorry, communicates online or in person, the actions they take, the groups they affiliate themselves with, the money they spend is part of it, but they are actually aiming to change behavior. And that's when it gets pretty creepy. And you can see this example of that happening in the movie. Now, I showed this movie to my two older children, both as teenagers. They didn't like it. And I'm glad that they didn't. And I don't mean they didn't like it like they were bored, but what they didn't like was finding out that that's basically going on and that that's the goal. And that the goal is to have their behavior changed without them knowing it, or to have their behavior changed without their parents recognizing it. That kids don't want to be duped. Like kids don't want to be manipulated or taken advantage of or have these like ulterior motives going on in the background when they think they're just playing a video game or they think they're just chatting with their friends. To find out that there's this group of like really, really smart people who graduated from Stanford to Harvard with behavioral science degrees and data scientists and all sorts of like theory around and philosophies around like getting people's minds actually changed and getting them to basically become different people without them even realizing that's what's going on. Nobody wants that. And so I'm glad I showed it to my kids. Someone asked, what age would you show this to a kid at? I don't think there's like a magical age. I mean, I wouldn't show it to a younger child, like maybe like a elementary school, maybe. I don't know. Again, I just don't have an exact age, but watch it for yourself. See if you've got a kid that you think needs to see it, or maybe it's just you relaying some of the messaging from it. I'm not advising this or prescribing this as a you have to sit down with your family and make them watch this movie. I do think it's worth watching. So, my top three tips. Let's lighten things up. How about another affirmation? You got this. Okay. You got this. It's all up to you. No matter how crafty and sneaky these companies are, you as a parent still get to determine how much of it you even allow your kids to have in their hands or have on their devices or have access to online. They can't actually make you put these kids online and into these apps and games. That is entirely your decision, and you get to decide whatever you are comfortable with for you, your family, your kids, etc. So my top three tips that I hope don't conflict with whatever approach you take are: set and explain, take it or leave it, visibility boundaries from day one. What I mean by that is, let's say you are handing your kid a brand new iPhone this Christmas season, this holiday season. Have a conversation with that kid on that day about you need access to that device, meaning the chats, the contact list, the phone numbers, the calls, whatever it is. You may need access to that at some point, and that you get that, that is yours. Now, the part two to that is I would love for you to explain why. I would love for you to let them know why that is. That it's not just you going, I'm bored, let me read your text. That there is some sort of explanation as to why you might need that access. Trust that your kids, don't trust that they're going to like Be thankful that you're telling them that you get access to read, look at, watch, see their device, have whenever you want. Don't expect them to like rush to hug you because you've told them you're getting that, but trust that they can grow to understand why that might be needed. That's again you having that conversation at whatever level you're comfortable with or think that they need at whatever age that they are. But I suggest this because to have a child have a device and they've had it in their hands and in their sole private possession for years, and to then come in one day and be like, "Hey, I need to see your phone," their reaction is going to be understandably like, "Why? No, what for?" Trust takes a long time to build, but setting it up from day one of like, I am only going to need this level of visibility in this type of situation. And when I need it, I'm going to explain why. And I'm going to tell you why it is so important, but it's your visibility to have. Like you deserve that. You own that. You're the one who purchased that device or who is paying for that subscription or that phone line or whatever it is. You have the ability to remove that device or remove that phone line, whatever it is, should they not be willing to give you that visibility down the road. But my hope is that by setting that expectation, that rule, that explanation and that honest discussion around why there may be situations where that's just required for their safety or for someone else's safety, that trust can be built with them. Like that can happen in real life. And it's happened with my own kids. They understand that I'm not just going to be like, hey, I feel like reading your text. If you're a parent who just simply wants that level of visibility too, that's also yours to have. I would recommend having that conversation with your kids so that, again, they understand that that's the case, that that's one of the rules for them having that device. Because what I think you'll find is, again, I think this is funny. I went online and I Googled something like parental controls for video games or something like that. And this was the image that one of the, it was Sony or I forget what it was. Someone kind of gave, one of the companies gave back to me of like, this is what it looks like for parents to like understand what games their kids are playing. Maybe like it might be this. You might actually see what they're playing and want to play too and have a great time doing it. It's also sometimes this. When they have access to a game pass that lets them download whatever game they want, and the last thing you knew, they were into this baseball or soccer game, but then you find out that they're playing some game that you would have never in a million years approved them to play, and you had no idea they've been playing it for the last 6 months. It can look like this. Same thing for this. I think it was like an Apple page where it was kind of like parental controls, Apple, or seeing or like demanding to see your kid's phone or something. And this is what came up. It's like, I mean, it might look like this if you ask your kid, "Hey, I need to see your phone," and they're like, "Sure, mom." It might also look like this. Like have those conversations early. So if and when that need arises to see a device, to look at a chat history, to see what's been said or shared online, that there is that understanding for them of they told me this was coming, like they told me that I might need this, but then you're able to explain why. That it is something that is for their protection. I'm not telling you they're going to still love it or be like, "Thanks for for providing my protection." But that handoff will be a lot smoother if those conversations have been had in the past of why that might be needed. Number two, I love this idea. It worked really well for me. It might not be what you want to do. And yet again, that's okay. Setting everything to require your approval. What I mean, until you're comfortable with the alternative. What I mean is when you go in to set up the parental controls on an Xbox or Minecraft or PlayStation or iPhone, whatever it is, you have the ability to basically block everything of requires my approval, requires parental approval, requires parent approval. And I mean things like purchases and downloads and things like that. Of course, you can set parental approval for those so that your kid can't just like run that credit card saved online and run up some huge bill online. Speaking of that, this Oliver Twist scene here of "Please, sir, may I have some more?" I feel like today is like kids begging for mine coins and V-Bucks and other kind of online currency so they can download new skins and wallpapers and weapons and whatever else. Now, when I say requiring approval to purchase something, in the event of, we'll use Minecraft as an example here, maybe you approve them to have, to purchase 500 mine coins so that they can add new stuff to their Minecraft world or server or whatever it's called. I've had this experience before where I add, say, 500 mine coins to the marketplace or whatever it's called, where there's also a level of approval is what then gets purchased. So it's not just the approval to have some money to purchase something within the game, but it's at what's getting purchased. And so my own kid, may come to me and say, "Can I download this world or this map or whatever?" And I go look at it, and it's like Minecraft by, or it's like Disney by Minecraft or Minecraft by Disney, and it's like Disney and Minecraft's own official map of like going to the Magic Kingdom and riding rides and being able to be Mickey or Goofy or whatever in the thing. And I'm reading through it and going, "Yeah, this actually looks kind of cool. Like you're totally allowed to purchase this." There's also been times that he says, "Can I get this?" And I take a look at it and it's some other thing and it's by like Demon Lord, 48, whatever. And I'm reading it and I'm like, I don't know what any, no, no. So approvals of what's being purchased, looking at who the maker of that thing is. Did Minecraft or Microsoft or Disney actually put out this thing, or is it by some user generated thing that you have no idea who that made or who made that thing? And so it's approvals for things like this. Is their profile available for public view or is it private? When it's private, are they still able to add new friends, like the friends that they have that you love and want them to be friends with online, or are you going to need to go in and manually approve anytime they want to add a friend? We talked about approving purchases and user generated content. Approving voice chat. Do you want them to be able to use a headset and talk online when they're like gaming with their friends? And if so, can you set it to where they can only chat with those who are in their contacts list, or is it going to be anybody that can chat with them? Downloading new applications. I still have my oldest son, my 17-year-old's phone set up to ask me for approvals for downloading mobile apps to his phone. The reason for that is sometimes it's a really good idea. Sometimes it's something he needs for school. It's Google Drive or SharePoint or something like that. Sometimes it's some mobile game and I look at it and I go, this looks fine. Sometimes it's some mobile game and I read the reviews and it's like, stole my money, won't refund my purchase, do not trust these people, no customer service. And I'm like, no. And I go and show him, like, here's why. It's not just like, no or decline. I will go and be like, hey, man, read all this. And he'll look at it and be like, oh, yeah, I don't want that. Again, it's having those conversations. So it's not just yes, no, where they assume that every question like that gets a yes and every question like this gets a no. Let them know the reason behind the decision, whether it's an approval or a denial from you. There's a million other things you can set up. And so the reason that I say requiring it until you're comfortable with the alternative is there will be things that you will set up as requiring parental approval that you then realize you don't actually need them to require that. Like maybe you set up some new device or some new game, and 5 seconds later, your kid comes back in going like, "Hey, it won't let me give my guy this red hat. It says I have to put in my PIN code or my parental control thing." And you're like, "Okay, I'm really busy working right now. I don't want you to have to come in and ask me if you can give your player green shoes next. Maybe you can go in and turn that one off." Maybe there's things that come in and go, "Hey, it won't let me play with strangers in other countries and chat with them and like talk trash with them online." And you're like, yeah, that's on purpose. So set these things up as requiring your approval and then chip away at them as not requiring your approval as you see fit. That helps you know what it is you've given them access to and what you haven't. Again, as opposed to finding out 6 months down the road, they've had this ability to do something that you had no idea they had the ability to do. It's kind of a pain to go in and set it all to no, and then some arguments might pop up of why can't I do this? Have those conversations, let that trust build over time. The last recommendation, setting up a saved logins and passwords file. This one is probably the least troublesome for folks to kind of like universally agree to. What I mean is, like I talked about earlier, like let's say your kid has an iPhone, an Xbox, and maybe like an old iPad or something like that. That's potentially three different sets of logins and passwords and IDs, and then however many apps are on that phone and that iPad and that Xbox and the logins and passwords for the profiles on those apps and those games and the purchasing pin and the 4-digit pin, the 6-digit pin sometimes, the saved credit card. Whose email is it that the two-factor authentication thing gets sent to? Wait, I think that was your mom's because didn't she set up this? It's like keep a saved passwords file for streaming apps, for devices, for whatever it is, so that you know how to get into those things when you need to. Not if and when you need to, but when you need to. Some of those passwords and logins may be things that you are fine with sharing. Maybe it's something like Disney Plus, where because of it's been 3 months or whatever amount of time, they made you create a new password and you created that, and your kid wants to watch Disney Plus and you don't want to have to remember the password or go looking for it, digging through. Maybe you've got a file that's saved with your kids where your kid can go in and watch Disney Plus. You can do that where they can still log in. Maybe you still, because of their age or your just preferences, have stuff you don't want them watching on Disney Plus or Hulu. So you still have control over their profile and what it can and can't watch. You really do have a large amount of control over what your kids have access to. It's not everything sometimes. We'll talk about that in a second. But a shared file of passwords that you are okay with them having access to so they can log into Disney Plus or Netflix or whatever it is on their own. Maybe you keep the ones for the gaming or the other device, the gaming devices separately because you don't want them to go in and actually enable things that you don't want them to have access to. Maybe you keep that separate for just you or you as parents. But that's something that I strongly recommend. Again, it's all trust. All of this stuff, like whether you give them access to that saved file, whether you go ahead and remove the parental approval required for X, whatever it is. Maybe you don't have that trust today, but you've got it 6 months later. Maybe you've got it a year later because you finally had time to actually go in and read the parental controls and what they allow for and what they don't for that specific game and that specific phone and things like that. My hope here is that you're not hearing me say that and say, one day you'll get to the desired place of having no parental controls. No, I want you to always have parental control and to feel like you have, real parental control over whatever it is you personally want control over for your kids and for your family. I just want to recommend again that you be aware, especially of the things that you have permitted and also of the things that you have like turned off so that you can know I've got this turned off. My kid should not be able to do these things over here. My kid has the ability to do these things over here, but I need to also make sure I understand what else that comes with that those tech companies may have kind of like snuck in there because they definitely do that. So choose your own adventure. The reason I've called it this, I asked in the room today, who all remembers choose your own adventure books where, you read to the bottom of the page and then it gives you two choices like proceed through the forest or go around the forest and try to cross the mountain. It's kind of like that in the world of, okay, which apps are we going to take on? Which devices are we going to just bite the bullet and let our kid have? We've said no phone for years, but we're thinking about actually giving them a phone. Like whatever the case may be, you are really choosing your own adventure when it comes to what you're going to allow and what you're not when that kid has been given access to that game, app, feature, device, whatever the case may be. Originally, I was saying this morning, I was going to create this kind of like master guide to like, here's everywhere you'll need to go to set up all the parental controls for all the top 10 apps, games, devices, that kind of stuff. This stuff changes so often with as many updates as these companies put out for their devices and games and apps that I felt like it would be out of date in no time. So, I mean, even depending on when you're watching this video, this may not even be what it looks like to set up a family, kind of like profile on an iPhone anymore anyway. So, if it looks a little different, that's okay. But the one thing I want you to do, the one thing I really do want to actually prescribe and kind of direct here is that when you are looking to better understand a set of family profiles or family or parental controls or set them up or just read up on them, go to the page or within the device itself of that actual like manufacturer. Because if you go to Google and you just Google like Apple parental controls, that top result may be Apple's parental controls page. It probably will be. But then you're going to have like 100,000 other pages that are like top 5 tips for managing Apple controls and quick and easy guide for Apple, family plan setup, whatever. Those things may have good advice in them. They may. There's nothing wrong with those except for the fact that you have no idea how current that thing is. And a lot of times what happens is you go to some page or you watch some video on YouTube and it looks really easy and they've done a great job explaining it, and you go to your advice and it looks nothing like what they just showed you. And then you realize that that video is from 2022 and Apple's put out 5 updates to their parental controls since then. If you go to Apple's parental control page or Nintendo's parental control page or Google or Instagram, whatever it is, you are at least going to be getting the current look and feel and options that they offer you for setting up parental controls. So this one is Apple, as I've already said. And I just had this example here of like screen time limits. You can set up screen time limits on your kid's new iPhone. It's a good idea, I think. I think that you should, again, kind of like the approvals, set it up to require approval first and then learn over time what you're comfortable with changing and what you're not, as opposed to just handing a kid a device and then finding out down the road that they're spending 14 hours a day on it, if that's a number that you didn't know they were spending on it or want them spending on it. You may be okay with 14 hours. It's your choice. But one story that I told here about the screen time limit thing was an example within my own family where my kid had Snapchat and I think it was set to like an hour a day. I think that was the like permitted amount. And it was like the third day of school, and he sends over a text saying, "Can I have more time for Snapchat, please?" At like 10:15 in the morning on the third day of school. And I'm like, why do you need, how could you possibly need more time on Snapchat? You've been at school for 2 hours and you've used an hour of it. We had to have this conversation. Again, it's that communication and that trust. What I didn't realize was that he'd had Snapchat open for like 45 minutes as he was getting ready that morning with his friends talking about, what do you want to do after class? Or should we play soccer at recess? Or do y'all want to go study together in the library at lunch? Perfectly acceptable, healthy conversations with his friends. He was then in a free period at school, which I would prefer his free periods to be used for studying and not being on Snapchat. But he had been on there for all of like 5 minutes, again, talking to his friends about, what do y'all want to do today? Because that's how they communicate. Like, that's how they actually, like, they don't text so much anymore. They're using Snapchat. I didn't know any of that. And so I, as a parent, need to not fly off the handle of like, how dare you need more time? It's, you've only been there 2 hours and you've already used an hour. There was a perfectly good explanation for why they needed more. So again, for that one use case of setting up screen times, talk to your kid about that of like, hey, I'm going to set you up with an hour a day. I'm not saying you get to tell me, no, I want 4 hours a day. But is there any reason why like that might not be a good number? Why you might hit an hour quicker than I think you would, and any reasons behind that? They may have an explanation. They may go, no, an hour a day is perfectly fine, and then it's not, and then you have that conversation why it's not. That's what I recommend, that constant communication and trust building. This is Google's. Again, it could look totally different from this now, but some of these things require you to have like a separate app to manage everything. So on Apple, you go in and do it from like your settings and your family plan, that kind of under security and that kind of stuff. With Google, there's this Google Family Link. It's a separate mobile app that you would have on your phone where you would set that up. If you Google parental controls, if you have an Android device or something like that, or a Chromebook or something, go there and find out what it is they have. They might tell you, go straight here and download this app. You do it all from there. They might tell you, open up that Chromebook and go to this page. Go to those pages and see what it is and how you set these things up. Nintendo's is pretty easy. I'm very thankful that they make it so easy. I still don't just give them the benefit of the doubt and wonder what else is going on in the background that they've just made look easy, but I'm like somewhat naive too. You can see screen time, you can set screen time limits, you can see how much they played last month, things like that. Now with Nintendo, there is 2 mobile apps required, which I'm kind of like, that's where that saved passwords file is really, really handy, because I've got to have my login and password and PIN number and security questions and QR code for Nintendo Online and Nintendo Parental Controls. I don't want 2 mobile apps to have to manage all this stuff, but that's what Nintendo requires, so I have it. This is what PlayStation's looks like. This is what Xbox looks like. But wait, there's more. Is like I mentioned before, you're not just setting up parental controls on these devices. It would be amazing if the devices then controlled the games. That is not how it works. The games and the apps have their own sets of parental controls. So you may have set up all this stuff on your kid's iPhone and you spent all this time and it's just ironclad. You've done it all right. Yet if you don't set up the parental controls within, I forget if this is Snapchat or if this is Instagram, some of you may recognize this more than I do, but you didn't set up the parental controls there, so it doesn't matter how locked down that phone is. Snapchat or Instagram is sharing stuff that you wish wasn't. Now, what I've highlighted here is that these companies are smart and, of course, have large legal teams who advise them on words like limit instead of prevent, but they don't make any promises. Like, they are very careful to not say things like completely prevent dot dot dot, because that is not what they are capable of. And they do not want to be nailed for promising that if they can get, or if they can not promise that. And so you'll see here, look over on the left, it says restrict sensitive content, limit your teen's ability to view sensitive content. Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah, it's stories and spelling. You need to be aware of that being the fact that by doing this, you can limit it. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they're only going to see one horrifying video a week? Or does that mean they're going to see 100 instead of 1,000? You should understand that. You should be aware. You should be able to look at their profile and see, like, what sensitive stuff is coming up in here. What's a video that like you've seen that was like you shouldn't have seen and wondered why it was shown to you? Have those conversations because you can see here over on the right, this filter or this feature helps hide potentially mature videos. I'm glad they're being honest. I'm glad they're being transparent by saying, again, there's a thing for building trust. They're not over promising what they can do. It's saying like this is a filter. It's not going to catch everything. And you can see here, like the screen in the middle, it's showing your kids what your parents are going to have access to. Like they're going to show, it's showing them or showing your kids what their parents are going to have access to, what they're going to be able to see, and what they won't. Now, this one I know is Instagram, and this is my least favorite. Again, I appreciate that they're being honest, but I have a big problem with this thing here in the middle of limiting unwanted interactions. Yeah, I realize in a perfect world, you could just prevent unwanted interactions online and in real life. I know that that's not the way the world works, so I'm not trying to be, unrealistic in what I'm asking for. I don't think it's being too much or asking for too much in this paragraph here of if you feel like you're being harassed, you can temporarily limit unwanted comments and messages. Why can we only temporarily limit them? Why can't we just always limit them? Does that mean that this thing is going to turn off and I'm going to have to make sure and go back and turn it on? How much time am I able to limit these? What does temporarily mean? Those are things you need to look into and to understand so that you can make informed decisions around. These are the parental controls for Fortnite. You can see here, Fortnite is like, it's just an online game. It's not a game like Mario Brothers, if you remember, where you're just trying to defeat a boss or complete a level. It's an online game with other people all playing together. It may just be you or your kid and their friends. It may be playing against people from all over the world, but you have the ability to go in and say, well, okay, my kid's going to be online playing with people I don't know, but I can hide my kid's profile name so no one knows who my kid is. No one is able to add my kid as a friend who I don't know. No one is able to use voice chat to like shout expletives at my kid for beating them in this game. You have the ability to go in and turn off a lot of stuff. Like I suggested before, I would turn it all off, all of it. Turn all of it off and let your kid come to you and go, I can't really play because I can't even like add my friends who I got this game to be able to play with. Okay, go in there and see, okay, am I going to have to just turn off the friend thing for a minute so they can get their friends added and then I can add it all back? Or then I can add that parental control back on? Or is it the type of situation where I can actually change the parental control, where my kid is able to add people that are like in their contacts on their phone only? There's all sorts of ways for each one of these games and apps to go in and tweak how your friend or how your kid can use this thing, how they can't. Those things may change over time, but I think it's better to start off having to approve everything than approving everything and finding out 6 months later there's been stuff going on that you had no idea that you could have prevented. This is what it looks like for Roblox, I believe. Microsoft, I don't want to badmouth anymore, but Microsoft to me makes it very hard to understand. It's 10,000 words for everything. It's page after page after page and links and links and links that take you to other pages. It's a lot of documentation. Some people prefer that, but to just let your kid get online and play Minecraft and to have some sense of what they have access to and what they don't and what requires parental approval and what doesn't, for me, is way harder than it should be. It's a lot of stuff. And even after doing it all right, like even after investing however many number of minutes or hours into setting all that stuff up, you're still going to encounter errors where you thought they were going to be able to do this thing because you thought you had it set up, but for whatever reason, Microsoft or Minecraft has said, no, you can't. So now you got to get back online and read about communicating with others and parental controls and figure out, okay, which others can I limit them from, which others can I allow, and things like that. And the errors sometimes just keep coming. You get things on your phone like an error occurred, please try again later. Later when? Later, 5 minutes from now, an hour, like that would be helpful. You don't usually get that much information. Sometimes you encounter some error and it just says like error code NP 1029428, and you're like, what on earth is that? And so you Google that, and sure enough, there's a whole video you can watch of how to fix it. And you go in and watch it, and then you go back to the app, and it's outdated because it's a 4 year old video, and that's not how you fix that error anymore. It is infuriating to come across these things, and you will come across them as you police your child's activity and presence online and other people's ability to see and use that presence. It is infuriating and it is exhausting, and it does make you want to internally scream or externally scream. And it can give you anxiety to no end. It can fill you with rage. It can make you want to scream and cry. But I have to say again that it's worth it. I would much rather be having these emotions because of how difficult it is to protect my kid online than to have these emotions because I didn't protect my kid online. So, my advice, it's not as cold as to just suck it up. I'm not saying that because it's hard, it's exhausting. It takes a ton of time to understand. And like I said, they then update everything and it all changes, and you have to read up on the new stuff, but they're worth it. They just really are. And so you've got this. It's not now a bad idea to give your kid the phone or the game or the app or the device or whatever it was you had planned for their next birthday or holiday or whatever it was, because you can control this stuff no matter how hard and difficult and painful the tech industry makes it for you to do just that. So, to wrap it up, I think that these four things, they're not all encompassing. It's not like, yeah, just do these four things and you're good to go. It's not that easy, but I do think that they're really important. I think the communication between you and your kids and you, it's number one. These are ranked in order, I would say, in that regard. And that you do need to have honest conversations with your kids based on your level of what you think they need to understand because of how old they are, the whatever they're doing online. They need to be honest with you and communicate with you about things they're coming across that they shouldn't be seeing. Letting them know that they are definitely not in trouble for coming to you and letting you know that they just saw something that they shouldn't have seen. That's a big trust win when they feel like they can tell you that, and not tell you that is going to telling you that is going to result in them having their phone taken away or their ability to do this taken away, but like them knowing that it's a good idea to let you know what they just saw. That's a huge win. That comes from communication and trust over time. That mutual trust is key. It's just as important as number one. And then also remembering after all of this that it is still entirely up to you. I think I said this before, but it doesn't matter if every other parent is comfortable having their kid on this device or this app or whatever it is. If you're not, you're not. It's kind of the example I gave this morning was it's kind of like the kid who could stay out later than all the other kids. Maybe that was you, or maybe it was someone, kind of that you were friends with growing up. You weren't not allowed to play with that kid because they could stay out later. Or the kid that was allowed to drink, as many sodas as they want, and the kids who weren't. Or the kid who was allowed to watch R-rated movies and you weren't, or vice versa. Every parent has their own level of comfort when it comes to protecting their kids online and where their kids are allowed to be online. That is your level of comfort to own, and that is your level of comfort to stand behind and not be subjected to the peer pressures of your kid or your circle of friends, whatever it is. Just state what the rules are. State what the rules are, state the reason behind those rules and what it is you're protecting them from. Have those conversations, not for the end goal to be so you can loosen up. I mean, so that the end goal can be just less stress about where they are online, what they're doing, and then lastly, to be respectful of people's other opinions and choices. It's because they're worth it. I keep saying that, but like your kid is worth it, and your kid's best friends are worth it. Everyone's parents have different levels of comfort and allowance in putting what they allow their kids to do and what they don't. It's okay for those things to be different in your house and in theirs. And so lastly, I love this image. I'm a Mario fan, but I think this image is really representative of our kids kind of dashing off into the online world. They're on this rocket ship that's going what feels like very fast. They could not care about how fast it's going, or that they're about to slam into this thing, or that there's this ghost coming their way, or this thing coming at them from over here. They're not even looking where they're going. That's kind of on us to beg them to understand why they need to look out where they're going and and to keep an eye what to keep an eye out for. We can only see so much of where they're like zooming off into. And so we've got to be really assured and really sure of ourselves that we have taken a look at everything we can control and made sound decisions around those things. It's not all bad news out there, and it's definitely not all good news out there. And we have certain levels of control, and we should own those. And so I ended the talk by just saying, like, that's all for me. I know I've just talked a ton. I was so glad to then get to hear other parents share their ideas, and they had some amazing ones. The very first idea that was shared was a mom who said that you can go to the Apple store with your phone and say, I need to set up the parental controls on this thing. I don't know how to do it. And that they will walk you through the whole thing. They'll like help you set up that whole thing. No idea that was true. I had no idea, and I told her I would have made it part of my talk. I would have told you that's what you should go do, not just go to like Apple's website. So again, share your ideas, share what's working, have that be a topic of conversation the next time you and your fellow parents get together. Talk about this stuff. Find out what each other are doing, what you're comfortable with, what you're not. Something scary that your kid ran into that another family may have had no idea was even possible. Have those conversations, share what you've learned, and you got this. We're all going to be good. So that's the talk. I know it was a lot. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I can't say I hope you feel more confident with putting your kids online because that wasn't really the goal. I want you to be able to establish your own levels of confidence and rules around protecting your level of comfort because that is certainly able to be done. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm not going to say good luck. I'm just going to say thank you so much for your time. Bye.